Okay, so today we're going to talk about solving absolute value equations. This is something that you haven't seen before. Okay, so this is something that is new. And so we're going to review absolute value real quick. Absolute value means distance from 0. And what do we always know about distance? What can you always tell me about distance here? Or what can you guys tell me about absolute value? It's always positive, because you can only go a positive distance. You can't go a negative distance. And so when we use the word distance, that indicates or that signifies that your answer will always be positive. And so we symbolize absolute value with the two vertical lines. Okay, it's different than parallel lines in geometry in that with absolute value we have like an expression in between those lines. It's not just two lines with nothing in between them. And then last but not least, those two lines act like grouping symbols. They're like parentheses. So if you have anything inside, you need to take care of that first. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at solving equations with absolute value. Okay, and so we're going to evaluate the following. 8.4 minus the quantity 2n plus 5 if n equals negative 7.5. So can somebody tell me what we're going to do? Yep, we're going to take negative 7.5 and we're going to plug it right in there for n. And so when I do that, what is 2 times negative 7.5? Negative 15. I'm going to add 5 to that. So then now, if I take negative 15 plus 5, because that's like a grouping symbol, what is negative 15 plus 5? Negative 10. Okay, and so now I need to take the absolute value of negative 10, which is positive 10. Now normally when you see two negatives you cancel them out. You don't do that when you've got absolute value. Okay, I needed to take the absolute value of negative 10, which was positive 10. If I subtract 8.4 minus 10, what do I get? Negative 1.6. Very good. So that's going to be the first part of your homework today. You're just going to be plugging numbers in, very similar to what we've done in the past. We've just now got absolute value thrown into the mix. So let's go ahead and look at another one. This one has a fraction. Okay. Evaluate 4x plus 3 minus 3 and 1/2 if x equals negative 2. So absolute value 4x plus 3 minus 3 and 1/2 if x equals negative 2. So I'm going to plug negative 2 in its place here. So really what do I have the absolute value of? 5. Yep. Absolute value of negative 5. Minus 3.5. And the reason why it's negative 5 is because you have negative 8. That's what 4 times negative 2 is. And you add 3 to that. So absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5. Minus 3 and 1/2. And what do we end up with? What's 5 minus 3.5? 1.5. If you think about it in terms of money, you have $5. You subtract $3.50. You should have $1.50 left. Or you already know that I will accept that as 3 over 2. What I won't accept is a decimal on that one. So make sure you answer in fraction form. All right. So let's look at this one, because these are more of the types of problems we're going to be dealing with today. It says a standard adult tennis racket has a 100 square inch head plus or minus 20 square inches. Write and solve an absolute value equation to determine the least and greatest possible sizes for the head of an adult tennis racket. And so what we're going to do, notice it's 100 and then it's plus or minus 20 square inches. Okay, and so if you notice here, this is an equation you're going to want to be familiar with. So you might want to jot this down in your notes. Okay. X minus C equals R, where C is your central value and R is your range. Now by having that, it makes this problem fairly easy to write. So in this problem, for those of you that are already writing it down, I want you to think about what would be the central value. The central value in this case is actually 100.
Yeah.
So I've got my x minus 100, that's my absolute value, and that's going to equal the range. What's the range here? The range is 20. Now we don't need to worry about the plus or minus yet because that will be taken care of with the absolute value. Now in order to solve this equation, okay, if you remember absolute value refer to both positive and negative answers, correct? So if you remember when I had like x squared equals 4, how would you undo the square? Do you remember how we take the square root, right, and undo it? If you had x plus 5 equals 7, how would you undo this here? You'd subtract 5 from both sides. So if you notice, it seems like every operation has something that undoes it. Okay, so even when we had multiply, if we have 5x equals 10, that's 5 times x equals 10. How do we undo multiplication? We divide. And so now that brings us to absolute value. The question is, what undoes absolute value? What can I do to this problem to get rid of these absolute value symbols? And the answer is plus or minus. So if I want to get rid of those, I am going to go ahead and take the positive or negative value of the right side. Okay? So in order to get rid of the absolute value, you make whatever's on the right side positive or negative. And that should make sense because Parker already said that the difference was plus or minus 20. Okay, so what undoes absolute value? Plus or minus. So now to solve that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 100 to both sides, which is something I've already done. Now here's the thing that you're going to need to do. Whenever you do something like this, you always put the number, in this case the 100, you always put it in front of the plus or minus sign. So in this case, on my left, those cancel, leaves me with x. Remember what I said, the 100 has to go first in front of the plus or minus. Now we need to think, okay, what does that really mean? That's two problems written in one. That means 100 plus 20. It also means 100 minus 20. So I just need to do those two problems quickly. I know that 100 plus 20 is 120. I know that 100 minus 20 is 80. So the question was determine the least and greatest possible sizes for the head of an adult tennis racket. So the answer will be 120 square inches, 80 square inches. So, or, there is your least and your greatest. All right, we're going to go ahead and look at another problem. We're going to look at a couple of these. Let's look at this one right here. Solve each equation, check your solutions. So now we're going to start with kind of some easier problems, and then gradually we're going to work our way up to a few more complicated equations. But 9 equals the absolute value of x plus 12. So I need to get rid of the absolute value symbols, right? So what undoes absolute value? Plus or minus. So I'm going to write this as plus or minus 9 equals x plus 12. Now what I do is what'd you say? Minus 12 from both sides. Where do I need to make sure to put that minus 12? Before the plus or minus. Good. So negative 12 plus or minus 9 will equal x. And now we need to break that down into two problems. Now some of you might be able to do this in your head. You might not have to write down both of them, and that's fine. I'm just going to do that just in case we have some people that can't quite visualize those answers yet. And that's quite all right. So I have negative 12 plus 9, which is negative 3. That's one answer. I have negative 12 minus 9, which is negative 21. Now let's revisit what this means. This means that if I plug negative 3 or negative 21 into this equation at the top, this one right here, I will get 9 as my answer. So you actually have two solutions on each of these. Now what's going to be neat is eventually, okay, as the year progresses, we're going to look at the graphs of absolute values. We're going to do that using the netbooks, and you're going to see that those are actually really neat, and you'll see why they have two values. Okay, let's look at the next one. 8 equals absolute value of y plus 5. So what do I do? Yep.
Plus or minus
8 equals y plus 5. Good. What do you do now?
Subtract 5.
Subtract 5. Very good. So what's my next step going to look like?
Negative 5 plus or minus 8
Negative 5 plus or minus 8
equals
equals y. Okay, so let's try and do this without maybe writing down both. Let's try and kind of move that up a little bit. So negative 5 plus 8. 3. Negative 5 minus 8. Negative 13. Very good. There are your two solutions. Okay. So far, so good? Questions? Okay. How do you solve this one? Plus or minus 1?
Change it to
plus or minus negative 1.
you just add the
What do you
plus,
think?
addition.
What do you think there? So do I just put plus or minus 1 there?
Negative 1.
Let's think about that. Let's just say that 2 would work. I'm just going to throw that out there. Why I just picked 2 out of the blue. What's 2 minus 3? Negative 1. But really, this says I take the absolute value of negative 1, correct? So what's the absolute value of negative 1? 1. Okay. So, this is absolute value. I know that absolute, what were you going to say?
You can't have the absolute value of number.
That's right. If you didn't catch what was just said, this is absolute value on the right side. Whenever you take the absolute value of anything, you're always going to get what type of number? Positive. So since this is negative 1, you can't do the problem. You'll never get a value to work. And so you can actually stop right now. You don't have to do any work. And your answer is actually no solution, which you will see that written this way, which is a little circle with a line through it. Another way you will see it written, I believe, is the empty set there. And so those are going to be your possible solutions. Now I think I have, let me see, do I have anything written there? No, I don't. Okay, I thought I had something written there. I guess I did. And so your solution there is going to be no solution. And so you just write a circle with a line through it, or you could put this, the 2 brackets. I would actually prefer that you answer it this way.
Well, I'm probably gonna work that out and not get an answer yet.
So now, this extraneous solution, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and write down that extraneous solution, which basically means an extra solution to an equation. Now I know one of the things you hated when you first learned to solve equations was having to check your work. Because I hated it. I hated checking my work. That was like, ugh. When it said check your work, oh my gosh, are you serious? We have to do that. I've already got the right answer. Why do I need to check it? We have to check our solutions on here because we're going to get extraneous solutions. Now basically, extraneous is a big fancy word for saying extra, which means we're going to get an extra solution that's there and shouldn't be there. So, solve the equation. What we're going to do is we're going to pick up with this tomorrow. We're going to call it good today. And so, if you want to go ahead and write down this equation in your notes for those of you, and we will come back and finish this tomorrow. What you can do then is get started on your homework. I would probably expect a short quiz tomorrow since it's not going to take as long in class. Okay? We're going to go ahead, I'm going to advance to the assignment page. There you go. On pages 30 through 31, your assignment will be 14 through 42, the evens. Okay, so you'll be able to do a few of those. You won't be able to do them all. And that will, we'll continue with this tomorrow.